Welcome to Move with Freedom Yoga. My name is Michelle, and in today's video, I'm going to be presenting a seated posture workshop that will open up our hips and also bring a calm state to your mind. So if you're ready to stretch those hips, go ahead and grab your mat and join me for this class. And thank you for joining me for this session. We're going to be doing seated postures that are going to open up the hips, stretch out the legs, and again, bring a calm state to your mind. But before we get started, I want to make sure that we are warmed up. So we're going to do 3 sun salutations. You are welcome to pause the video and do more, but I'm going to make sure that you are warmed up with 3 sun salutations. So join me at the front of the mat in Tadasana or mountain pose, and we'll get started. Reaching the arms up overhead, inhale. Let's go ahead and forward fold, Uttanasana. Halfway lift, the hands to the shins. Fold down. We're going to step back to a top of a push-up and then lower the belly all the way down to the floor. Tuck the toes under and extend the elbows, lifting the hips and chest off the mat. Tuck the toes under. We'll come to hands and knees. And then we're just going to go to a child's pose. This is, of course, a modification for the sun salutation. Back to hands and knees. Downward facing dog. Lift your hips. Let's pedal out the feet. And then come forward to the top of your mat. Halfway lift, fold down, and rise up. Let's do another one. Touch your toes. Halfway lift. Fold down. Go ahead and step back to the top of the push-up. We're going to go down halfway. Come to an up dog, or you can do high cobra. Tuck the toes under, and then lift your hips up for downward facing dog. Look to the front of the mat and come forward. Forward fold and rise up. Last part of our warm-up, touching the toes. Halfway lift. Come to your Chaturanga Dandasana or belly down, up dog or high cobra, and then downward facing dog. So our first pose for today is Sukhasana. So Sukhasana is called easy pose. And when you're doing this pose, it should feel easy, hence the name easy pose. So start with your knees to the ceiling. You're going to lower your left knee to the side and then either cross at the ankle and shin or take the right leg in front of the left leg. And this is easy pose or Sukhasana. And then to do the other side, you would just switch your right leg closer to your groin, your left leg in front, and sit with easy pose. So sitting in an easy pose, cross-leg position, you might notice that your knees might not be close to the floor. So what a great option is to use a block. So this is a yoga block. They come in all shapes and sizes, in different densities. Mine, of course, is a rectangle, as you can see, and it's pretty dense. I like this type of block because it is a solid block. You want to be mindful that your block is not easily pushed over and that it is able to provide you with enough support for your body. So I'm going to take the block and place it underneath my hips. And then when I come into easy pose, I will have the elevation to the hips so that I can more easily sit in the easy pose, noticing how my knees are now more spread wide on the mat. And I have this elevated hip position so that I'm able to use this position to open up the hips. So if easy pose is not coming easy for you and sitting with the legs crossed or one in front of the other is not something, or both legs in front crossed is not something that's accessible, I recommend that you do one leg at a time. So if sitting like this, it's causing the knees to bunch up towards your chest, then take one knee out of the equation and just do one knee. So you're just working on the right knee now, the left leg. It can be either straight or out to the side, and you're sitting up nice and tall with your knee working on the rotation of the knee out to the right side. And then, of course, you would switch to the other side, bending the left knee and pointing that one down to the floor. Another option for the seated pose, Sukhasana, to help you to elevate the hips is to use a blanket, so a yoga blanket. So I have mine here folded into like a rectangle shape. I'm going to roll the blanket 1 or 2 times so that it provides a soft, propped up cushion to prop my hips up with. And then I'm going to assume my Sukhasana or easy pose. Crossing at the ankles and shins is, again, one option. And using the cross leg position to the shins, I always recommend that you do both sides in any variation of your Sukhasana. Switch sides. So right now, you'd be your right leg that's in closest to your body and your left leg that's away from the body. So you would sit like this for a few moments and then switch sides. So you can practice both ways of sitting so that you're not training one leg to be more flexible or stronger than the other. So I always suggest that you you practice with both legs having a turn to be in front. When you're in your Sukhasana, you're sitting up nice and tall, meaning that your top of your head is up towards the ceiling or the sky, and your hips are planted firmly down from right to left, firmly down into the surface that you're sitting on. And this is easy pose or Sukhasana. So our next pose is bound angle pose or Baddha Konasana. So with Baddha Konasana, the bottoms of your feet will come together, lining up toe to toe, instep to instep, and heel to heel. You can hold on to your ankles or your toes and stay in an upright position, or if you rather, come forward, taking the chest towards your toes and bending forward. Another variation of Baddha Konasana is to have your heels close to your groin. And then the same thing, holding on to your ankles or your toes, and then taking a fold forward. What you want to do is avoid rounding at the the lower back or mid back. So not really rounding of the rounding of the back this way. You want to lead with the chest, so you're coming forward, chest towards your feet. That may limit the amount of forward flexion that you get because you're more straight, or it might seem that the forward flexion, the forward fold is less, but it's probably the same. But some people round their spine to mimic getting closer to the foot, when it's really not necessary because it is a hip opener and we want a more flat back than a rounded spine. So we want to be more forward on the pelvic bowl rather than backwards. And then another variation is to have a more diamond shape with the feet. So pushing the heels away from the body and forming a big space in between your heels and your thighs or your groin area. And then I like to tell my students to make space for their body as you come forward. So still keeping that erect spine though, not hunching over, but coming forward and doing your forward fold this way with your heels away from the groin. So just as with the other hip opener or seated poses, you can use a yoga block underneath your hips to elevate the hips, to allow the posture to be more accessible. So I'm going to align my feet, bottom of the feet to touch. Same thing, you can have the groin closer to the block and then coming up and forward, or taking the feet away from the block and then coming forward that way. Again, still more of a straight spine than a rounded back. So your shoulder blades are closer together rather than being further apart in that rounded back position. And then taking the forehead down towards the feet. So that was Baddha Konasana, or bound angle pose. The next pose that we're doing is Maha Mudra, which is Great Seal pose. And that is similar to the head to knee pose that you'll see in another part of the video. But in this pose, you're holding on to your feet, but your chest is further away from your leg. So it doesn't look like, it's not a full forward fold. Think of it as a halfway forward fold. So let me demonstrate. So your feet are going to be, legs are going to be out straight. Again, I'm going to take the left foot into the inside of the right thigh, bringing the arms up overhead. Look towards your big toe. Bring your hands to heart center. Hinge at the hip. So again, we're hinging, the movement comes from the hip rather than the back. So we're not going to crunch the back, separating the shoulder blades. The shoulder blades stay towards each other, not touching, but towards each other, as if you were in a mountain pose. And then from that mountain pose position, then you're going to come forward and then reach towards the toes. So like I said, notice that the chest is not on the leg, it is hovering over the leg, and then you're going to look forward towards the toes. This is the Great Seal pose, or Maha Mudra. Also in Maha Mudra, this is a great opportunity to use our bandhas, right? So we have a bandha in the pelvic area, in the throat, and of course in the belly. So as you're doing your Maha Mudra, you can really access the bandhas in the body. So your Mulyana bandha, your throat bandha, and your Uddiyana bandha. So the pelvic muscles come in and up. Your belly goes in and up as well. And then the throat chakra is coming, or the throat bandha, is going down. And so as you come forward in your forward fold, everything is locked together. You're aware of all of your bandhas locking and holding you in place. And then as you release the posture, you relax the body. So in this pose, Janu Shirshasana, head to knee pose, your head is going to touch towards your knee. So we're going to get set up, extending both legs. Take your left foot in towards your right inner thigh. And I bring the arms up overhead. And again, imagine that you have a nice, let me turn this way. Imagine that you're going to have a nice long spine. So I'm not going to round and crouch in, crowding in the chest towards the thigh. You're not going to collapse in, I should say. Keep the chest open like you would be in mountain pose or something like that. Bring the arms up overhead and then reach forward any amount as far as you can. Hold on to the foot or ankle or shin, and you can stay here if you're just beginning. As you come more flexible and practice the pose more, then your forehead, right, is going to touch towards your knee. Sometimes it really comes towards your shin, depending on your flexibility. So you're going to tuck in the chin towards the collarbone and bring your forehead onto your knee. A modification for head to knee pose is to use the block. So the block can be on the highest level, it looks like this, or a sideways or horizontal rectangle, or flat. All right, so I'm going to show all versions. So the highest level, I'm going to take my forehead to the block, right? The block is going to represent my knee, and then I'm going to come forward and holding it there. As you progress further into your practice, then you can take it onto the more horizontal position, and then taking head to knee. And then finally, of course, you're going to take it more to the lowest level for your block, bringing the head to the knee, and then taking the arms forward. And then, of course, over time, you'll be able to remove the block totally and then find that position, Janu Shirshasana. Our next yoga pose in this seated yoga posture workshop is Kranchasana, or herring pose. So right away, you'll see that I have my block and a strap with me, because those two items are come in very helpful with this posture. So again, seated on the floor, I'm going to take my left foot to the inside of my right thigh, bend the right leg, and hold on to the right foot as I lean back to extend the leg up towards the ceiling. So you want to have your knee towards straight. It doesn't have to be super straight. You always want to keep a slight bend in your joints. Of course, you don't want to lock them out, but you want to go towards straight. What I advise my beginner students, or students who are just learning this posture, I kind of sometimes advise them that they can hold on to the back of the knee to give support to the knee if that's needed, or take a strap, place it around the ball of the foot, and then extend up towards the ceiling. Same idea with a towards a straight knee. Kranchasana, or herring's pose, could also look like this, where the left leg, or one of the legs, I'm going to take the left leg back, is towards the heel. So the foot is towards the heel, the knee is bent. Same way to get into the posture. This one is a little bit more advanced, and you're going to take that foot up as well. So support behind the knee, hold on to the foot, or adding in the strap. Herring pose. Sage pose is the next posture. So not only is sage pose a hip opener, but it also is an opener for the shoulder. So this posture is something that we do when you're really warmed up and ready to get a good stretch and hip opener. So to get into the sage pose, you're going to take both legs out straight and bend the right knee and place the foot on the floor, engaging the left leg throughout the whole posture. The right hand is going to come forward, and I like to advise to turn the thumbs or the palms up, and so that puts you into an internal rotation, allowing the body, the arm, to bend back and touch towards your thigh. Your left hand is going to Also thumb turns up to the ceiling and rotate back and then bind. So once you have the bind behind your back, you'll look towards the big toe as your focal point or drisdi. The inhale prepares us for that exhale, taking the head down towards the knee. So the next pose in this class is called Malasana squat or Garland pose. It is an extremely wonderful pose to open up the hips and to get you into a more calm state. So let me show you what the pose will look like, or a modification of the pose, which is technically your hips are not on the floor. You have a wide leg. So I'll start from standing from Tadasana. I'm going to hinge at the hips, bend my knees, and bring my seat down towards the floor. So this is what I'm saying though. So I'm not actually sitting on the floor for this posture. I'm hovering over the floor using the strength of my legs to keep me up. Taking my hands to a prayer position in the center of my heart. My elbows touch the inside of the knees. And this is a variation for Malasana squat. Now, sometimes holding this position is not accessible to some students. So that's when I suggest that they actually sit on the floor with their knees bent, feet on the floor, and take a similar posture to Garland pose, but make it a beginner version. So you're sitting on the floor, taking the hands to heart center. Your elbows are still on the inside of the knees, and we're taking it here so that they can get the benefit of the Garland pose or Malasana squat, but without the need for the strength and flexibility to hover over the floor in a more traditional presentation of the posture. So this is a modification for Garland pose. The use of a block would be another way that I would present a modification for Garland pose. So the block can be in any position, so flat or on the side or in the highest variation. Sometimes the highest variation doesn't provide a lot of support, so there's definitely need for caution for that, but I will show it. So having the block on the highest level, taking the feet in front of the block, turning the toes out, hands to heart center, and then lowering the seat onto the block so that we're up higher rather than hovering off over the floor, having the support of the block to supplement this the strength of the legs. So in the highest version or the highest position, and then also can take it to mid-level as the hips open and as you get more comfortable having your body or your legs in this open wide position, and then finally down to the lowest position. And then from here, I like to suggest that the student now from a seated position, they push into the heels and hover a little bit, holding themselves over the block for increasingly amounts of time. And then when it's time to sit down, the block is there to add support. So it's a push forward, hovering over the block, and then sitting on the block. And the same thing can happen, of course, in the different positions. So I have it at mid-level, here, hover, and sit. So that is another variation for Malasana squat, using the block for support. Another variation for Malasana squat is a bind. So you can provide shoulder opening in the Malasana squat as well. So coming into the squat in the same way that we did from a standing position, hinging at the hip, turning, the toes are turned out, heels turned towards each other, coming down with the hinge of the hip and squatting down. Now the bind comes here where I'll take the left hand forward, turn the palms up, and rotate the hands back behind. And then the right hand, same thing, taking it palm up and binding from there. If the fingers don't quite clasp, that's where a strap would come in very handy. So, same idea, taking the strap into your left hand, thumb up, bind, and then holding the strap with the left hand or with the right hand. And then from the side view, so the strap would be behind you, you'd hold it under and bind that way. Also, what could happen when you're doing your malasana squat is that your heels lift up off the ground. So what I would suggest is the use of a blanket. So maybe folding it over just twice, placing the blanket on the mat, and then having your feet or heels on the blanket and then coming down. So what that will do is to bring the floor up towards your heels so that you'll have some support to the heels. So bringing the floor up closer to you, but with the use of a blanket. And that is another modification for the malasana squat. So the last pose is Uttanasta Konasana, which is a wide leg forward fold. So to get into the wide leg forward fold, I like to use my mat as a guide for where my feet are going to be. So I'm going to turn to the long edge of my mat. I'm going to take the heels out to the side of the space on the mat and allow the hip bones or sitting bones to be right in the center, or the body to be right in the center of the hip bones. So we're not hunched under or have some backwards tilt, right in the center. As with most hip openers, the movement comes from the flexion of the hip going forward. So it's never a rounded, very rarely a rounded spine. It's forward, or it's a flexion. And so I'm going to come out towards, away from my feet with my hands. And maybe you're on your fingertips to start. Maybe on your hands. Elbows can bend and you can stay right here. Over time, you'll be able to walk your hands forward and then maybe take your chest a little bit closer to the floor. What you want to avoid is the heels or the feet rolling in towards the fold. You want to keep the toes up towards the ceiling. Let the chest be the guide, flexing at the hips and then coming forward. And then over time, the forehead will come onto the floor, or the forehead and the chest. So to modify the posture, you can take your yoga block underneath your hips. Okay, so again, the same position, using the yoga mat as a guide as to where your heels will go. And then here is a good position. Taking a flexion to the hip, coming forward, reposition myself on the mat, and coming here. Starting with on the hands, and then over time, bending the elbows, bringing them down towards the floor, and then holding it here so you can get a really good stretch to the inner thighs. Fighting and then walking out, and then coming down. And then back up onto an erect spine. So you can also use a second yoga block to assist in this posture. So take the wide legs. I'm going to take the yoga block down onto the lowest level and then come forward, rest my forearms onto the block and practice this way. Another option would be to take the block underneath your forehead. So that's another way you can use the block for your seated wide leg forward fold or Uttanasana Konasana. All right, well, I hope you had a great experience in this class. Thank you so much for joining me for this seated hip opening postures. Hopefully you feel nice and calm and ready to start your day. Please join me for other videos that I have linked in this video. If you like what you see, please leave a kind comment below. Subscribe, share, and push that like button. And I will see you soon in another video. Be well.